Can't wait till this is all over with. Oh, hi. Dr. Showbiz Bodybuilder here. You might remember me from such anatomy lectures as the orbit and the eye. The remaining sensory nerves that pass through the orbit are branches of the first and second, or ophthalmic and maxillary, divisions of the trigeminal nerve. Such movies as Red Victoria.
Hurts. Ow, ow.
Explain this.
What happened to my pool?
Yeah, what did happen to your pool? Or such bodybuilding contests as the 1989 ANBC Metropolitan. I'm here with my shelter-in-place girlfriend, the Sissy squat apparatus. I'll be showing you how I use this in a moment, but first an introduction. If you've ever competed in a bodybuilding contest, or even attended one, you're probably familiar with the abdominal and thigh pose, one of the mandatory comparison poses. You put your hands behind your head, flex your abdominals, and the thigh of your choice. I had a pretty good abdominal and thigh shot back when I was competing in beauty pageants in the 80s and 90s. That was actually one of my better poses. Of course, that was 30 years ago, and now, like most people in their 50s, I generally avoid making public appearances in my underpants. But I still work out occasionally. So here's what I've been doing on my apartment balcony for abdominals and thighs during the zombie apocalypse. For the last few decades, my favorite abdominal exercise, which is really an abdominal and thigh exercise, as I'll explain in a moment, has been the hanging leg raise. Recently, I've been doing my hanging leg raises on this elegant dipping and chinning apparatus. When you see me using wrist straps, or lat straps as they're sometimes called, anytime during this video, it's because I don't want my grip to be the limiting factor during any exercise. So when I use them during hanging leg raises, for instance, I'm trying to ensure that my abdominals will fail before my grip does. Let me just pause here for a legal disclaimer. I'm not making any recommendations in this video. This is simply a chronicle of my activities. If you get injured mimicking my stupid behavior, don't waste your time trying to sue me. There are plenty of multimillionaires on YouTube telling you how to play video games. Go sue one of them for giving you carpal tunnel syndrome. Look, if you want to make sure you don't get injured, just sit still. I'm old and worn out and exercising on the balcony of an apartment next to the airport. Just let me die in peace. And now back to my hanging leg raises. Keeping my legs pretty straight and trying to focus on using the power of my abdominal wall, I bring my ankles to the crossbar and then perform a controlled lowering of my legs. I try not to swing too much. I'm trying to avoid using momentum to perform the action, focusing instead on using muscular contraction. I exhale as I raise my legs and inhale as I lower them. I'm contracting my six-pack muscles, the rectus abdominis, and my oblique abdominal muscles to bring my pelvis closer to my rib cage in a crunching action. But I'm also using my hip flexor muscles to raise my thighs. To flex at the hip, I'm using the rectus femoris, the quadriceps muscle running down the middle of the thigh, the tensor fascia lata, which runs to the outer side of the thigh, and the sartorius, that attractive long muscle which runs towards the inner side of the thigh. You can't actually see the most powerful hip flexor muscle, the iliopsoas, because it's buried deep on the back wall of my abdomen behind my intestines. This muscle up here is the serratus anterior, and although I'm not thinking about it, it's contracting during this exercise to stabilize my shoulder blades. I know how you young people of the modern day like to talk about exercises for your core. Well, if any of you were to look up from your phones long enough to ask me if the hanging leg raise was a core exercise, I'd tell you to get off my lawn. If you were in the parking lot of my apartment complex, walking your pandemic comfort pet, or packing your car before fleeing to your rural bomb shelter, here's the view you'd have prior to calling the authorities to report my suspicious activities because you're bored and overwhelmed with anxiety. I do hanging leg raises twice per week. During my second session, I do fewer reps, but I isometrically pause at parallel. That really takes momentum out of the equation and ensures that I'm working my muscles maximally. Please don't try to do these. Your core is likely to explode all over the place. An easier version of this exercise is hanging knee raises, which is sort of a hanging crunch. Again, the abdominal muscles connect your pelvis to your rib cage. So I'm contracting my abs to bring my pelvis and rib cage closer to each other. Let's move on to my favorite superset for thighs, squats, followed by stiff leg deadlifts. Here I am a few years ago performing the barbell versions of those exercises at Doug's Gym in downtown Dallas, Texas, which I would tell you to visit if it hadn't closed down last year after being in business under the original owner, Doug Ide, for 6 decades. On my balcony, I do Sissy squats. This is what a traditional Sissy squat looks like. It's said that this exercise was invented by British bodybuilder Monty Wolford and popularized by American bodybuilder Vince Gironda. Evidently it was called a sissy squat because it's done without a big manly barbell across your back. It can be performed by clutching a barbell plate against your torso, cradled in your arm, but I prefer using a sissy squat bench. I hook my feet under the foam rollers, for lack of a better term, lean back against the padded support, which I've adjusted so it's just below knee level, squat down as far as I can, trying not to lean forward, and stand back up. This exercise feels more like a leg extension than a squat. I don't really feel it much in my glutes or my inner thighs like I do when I'm doing deep barbell squats. This exercise really feels like it's isolating the quads. After doing a couple of sets of 20 without weight, I do a few sets holding dumbbells behind my thighs. Look at this beautiful set of adjustable chrome dumbbells that I bought off of Craigslist several years ago. You adjust the weight by flipping these levers. Flip all of the levers down, and you've got a 55-pound dumbbell. Flip all the levers back, you got a 2.5-pound dumbbell handle. This is what a 30-pound dumbbell looks like. I like holding the dumbbells behind me and leaning back instead of forward because this position seems to put maximum tension on my quadriceps. I position a pair of foam squares that I purchased at Five Below beneath the dumbbells so I don't scratch that beautiful chrome against my balcony's concrete floor. I don't bounce the dumbbells off the ground. I touch them to the pads, pause almost imperceptibly, and focus on contracting my quadriceps to bring me back up. I do sets of 10 with 30, 40, and 50, and then I do as many as I can with the 55s. Now, I know some of you that are watching this are saying, hey, I took a kinesiology course when I was a freshman in college, and you're going to wreck your knees by squatting below parallel. Well, I've been breaking parallel for over 40 years, and my knees are one of the few body parts that are actually working pretty well these days. I break parallel. You don't break parallel. I break parallel. And please don't tell me how to do it. It sickens me. I superset the squats with stiff leg deadlifts. A superset is a pair of exercises for opposing muscle groups done one right after the other. Sissy squats work the quadriceps, the muscles in front of the thigh that straighten the knee, while stiff leg deadlifts work the hamstrings, the muscles in back of the thigh, which bend or flex the knee and straighten or extend the hip. Stiff leg deadlifts are a hip extension exercise. I haven't been doing any knee flexion exercises, like leg curls, for a while now. Stiff leg deadlifts also work the glutes and the largest muscle of your inner thigh, the adductor magnus, both of which are powerful hip extensors. I'm using a stance that I think I invented. I keep my feet just wider than shoulder width and turn them slightly inward. I feel that this stance takes some of the stress off of my lower back and helps me instead to focus it on my glutes and hamstrings. I'm still using the core muscles of my back, the spinal erectors, which is good because that keeps a good core balance with my opposing abdominal musculature. But in my mind, by using this form, I'm ensuring that my glutes and hamstrings are maximally involved. I keep the same repetition and weight scheme as with the squats. So after a set of squats with no weight, I do a set of deadlifts with no weight. When I do a set of squats with the 30-pound dumbbells, I follow it with a set of stiff leg deadlifts with 30-pound dumbbells. Here I am finishing off my final superset with stiff leg deadlifts, holding a total of 110 pounds, which is less than a third of the weight I used when I was in the blush of youth. My apologies, I realize this is not a particularly pleasant view, and my panty lines are just atrocious. But what I'm trying to demonstrate is that I'm pausing at the bottom of each rep. Then I isometrically contract my glutes and hamstrings. You see that? I'm actually going to make you watch that again. See my glutes contracting isometrically at the bottom before I start coming up? Then I hold that contraction as I stand up. This contraction and the position of my feet really helps me focus on using my glutes and hamstrings on this exercise. Now that you're done clawing your eyes out after viewing that unfortunate close-up of my gigantic rear end, allow me to wrap up by noting that after my squats and deadlifts, I finish this workout by lunging in place with no weight. Lunges work all parts of the thigh, front, back, and inner thighs, not to mention the glutes. I go as deep as I can, though I really need to put those foam pads under me so I'm not tapping my kneecaps against bare concrete. Even I'm willing to admit that's probably not good for me. Someone who hasn't done deep lunges before is likely to notice particular soreness in the inner part of their thighs the following day. The often neglected adductors and sartorius really get worked during this exercise. As I lunge, I try to think about not only contracting the quadriceps of my lead leg, but also the glutes and hamstrings of my trailing leg. Back when it was safe to go out in public, I preferred to do walking lunges at the end of my thigh workout instead of lunging in place. I feel like I get a better stretch and work my muscles more fully when I do walking lunges. As seen here, in the parking lot behind Womack's Gym in Keller, Texas. There I go, lunging into the pre-dawn darkness. I sure miss Womack's Gym. Owners Ken and Linda Womack were nice to me, even when I engaged in primal screen therapy during my workouts. Wow, thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video instead of clicking over to Kylie Kardashian's 30-day glute challenge after 13 seconds like everybody else did. You know, you should really subscribe to my channel because I've got all sorts of clips coming up from movies and bodybuilding contests. You are going to go nuts. Good night, honey.